He dumped her for a California model. But on his birthday? She pulled up in a limo, with quadruplets. His jaw dropped, hers didn't. Were they his? A setup? Or her revenge? What happened next made his new fiancée walk out. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. You're about to witness something insane. Smash that subscribe button and shout out where you're watching from, because tomorrow's story will hit even harder. No breaks. No distractions. Now let us begin. The crystal chandeliers of the Ashford estate cast dancing shadows across marble floors as Vincent Ashford adjusted his platinum cufflinks for the third time. 50 years old today, and he had everything a man could want: a sprawling Malibu mansion, a net worth that made Forbes sweat, and Cassandra Milano draped across his arm like a designer accessory. "Baby, you look stressed," Cassandra purred, her surgically perfected lips forming a pout that had graced magazine covers from Milan to Miami. "It's your birthday party, not a board meeting." Vincent forced a smile, though something hollow gnawed at his chest. The party buzzed with Hollywood's elite, tech moguls and politicians, all here to celebrate him, or rather to be seen celebrating him. Yet as he surveyed his kingdom of success, a strange emptiness echoed through the applause. "Just want everything perfect," he muttered, his eyes scanning the crowd. Perfect. Like the word had lost all meaning over the past 3 years. Cassandra's laugh tinkled like expensive wind chimes. "Well, it is. Look around, Vincent. This is what dreams are made of." She gestured toward the infinity pool where starlets posed for Instagram photos, the champagne fountain flowing Dom Perignon, the string quartet playing on the terrace overlooking the Pacific. Dreams. He remembered when his dreams had been simpler. 3,000 miles away, Elena Ashford, she'd kept the name, though she wasn't sure why, stood in her modest Philadelphia apartment, staring at 4 sleeping faces. Her quadruplets, barely 2 years old, had finally surrendered to exhaustion after a day that had tested every ounce of her patience. Michael, with Vincent's stubborn chin. Sophia, who had her father's intense green eyes. Isabella, whose laugh reminded Elena of better days. And little David, the quiet observer who seemed to carry wisdom beyond his years. "Mama loves you," she whispered, brushing a strand of dark hair from Sophia's forehead. "Even if your daddy doesn't know you exist." The irony wasn't lost on her. Today was Vincent's birthday, a date she'd once marked with handmade cards and surprise dinners, back when she believed their love could weather any storm. Now it served as a reminder of everything she'd lost and everything she'd gained. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Maria. "Still think you should tell him about the kids." Elena's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Tell him what? That the night before he served her divorce papers, they'd conceived 4 miracles? That while he was parading his new trophy around charity galas, she was learning to change 4 diapers simultaneously? That she'd discovered her pregnancy the same week their divorce was finalized? "He made his choice," she typed back. "We're better off without him." But even as she sent the message, Elena's reflection in the darkened window told a different story. She looked tired, bone-deep exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Dark circles shadowed eyes that once sparkled with hope. Her wedding ring had left a pale band on her finger that refused to fade, like a ghost of promises broken. The apartment felt smaller tonight, filled with the detritus of single motherhood, toys scattered across the floor, bottles drying by the sink, laundry that never seemed to end. This wasn't the life she'd imagined when Vincent had slipped that 5-carat diamond on her finger 7 years ago, promising her the world. She'd gotten the world, all right. Just not the one she'd expected. Elena sank into her threadbare sofa, pulling a throw blanket around her shoulders. The silence felt heavy, broken only by the soft breathing of her children and the distant hum of city traffic. Tomorrow she'd put on her brave face again, take the kids to the park, pretend that her heart wasn't still breaking 3 years later. But tonight, on Vincent's birthday, she allowed herself to remember. Their first dance at their wedding, when he'd whispered that she was his everything. The way he used to bring her coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, reading the financial section aloud in dramatic voices to make her laugh. How he'd hold her during thunderstorms, even though she was the one afraid of lightning. Before Cassandra. Before the late nights that turned into early mornings. Before the credit card bills for jewelry Elena never received and restaurant charges for meals she never ate. Before he looked her in the eye and said, "I need something more exciting in my life." Elena wiped away a tear that had escaped despite her best efforts. She was stronger now, She had to be. For tiny humans depended on her strength, her love, her unwavering commitment to being everything their father wasn't. She glanced at the manila envelope on her coffee table, the one that had arrived yesterday. Vincent's birthday party invitation, forwarded by their old mutual friend who'd probably meant well. The golden script mocked her, "Join us for an evening of celebration as Vincent Ashford turns 50. As if she'd want to witness his happiness. As if she'd subject herself to watching him play happy family with the woman who destroyed hers. But as Elena stared at that invitation, something shifted inside her chest. Not anger, she'd burned through that emotion long ago. Not sadness, that was her constant companion. This was something else entirely. Determination. Vincent had walked away from their marriage believing he was trading up, that she was somehow insufficient for his grand life. He'd never even asked if there were consequences to their final night together. Never wondered if his boring wife might be carrying pieces of his future in her womb. Maybe it was time he learned what he'd really given up. Elena reached for her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in months. "Maria? I need a favor. And I'm going to need to borrow your black dress. The really nice one." The birthday celebration reached its crescendo as Vincent stood on the marble steps of his estate, champagne flute raised toward the star-drunk California sky. 200 of the world's most powerful people hung on his every word, their faces illuminated by the golden glow of strategically placed torches. "Friends," Vincent's voice carried across the crowd with practiced confidence. 50 years ago, I entered this world with nothing but potential. Tonight, I stand before you having built an empire that spans continents." Applause rippled through the gathering. Cassandra beamed beside him, her hand possessively wrapped around his bicep, her engagement ring, a 12-carat monstrosity, catching the light like a spotlight. "But success isn't just about what you build," Vincent continued, his words flowing like aged whiskey. "It's about knowing when to let go of what no longer serves you, and embracing what elevates you to greatness." More applause. He caught sight of his business partner, James Morrison, nodding approvingly near the infinity pool. The tech moguls from his latest acquisition clustered near the champagne fountain, their wives adorned in jewels that could fund small countries. This was his kingdom. This was victory. "So tonight, as I begin my 6th decade, I want to thank everyone who's made this journey." The sound of tires on gravel interrupted his speech. Not unusual, late arrivals were common at parties of this magnitude. But something about the approaching engine made Vincent pause mid-sentence. It was too smooth, too deliberate. The crowd's attention began to shift toward the circular driveway. A black limousine emerged from behind the estate's towering palm trees, its windows tinted darker than midnight. The vehicle moved with funeral precision, coming to a stop directly in front of the main entrance where valets scrambled to attention. Vincent's champagne flute suddenly felt heavy in his hand. "As I was saying." But no one was listening anymore. 200 pairs of eyes fixed on the limousine as its engine fell silent. Even the string quartet seemed to sense the shift, their melody fading to an uncertain whisper. Cassandra's grip tightened on his arm. "Vincent, who is that?" He didn't answer because he couldn't. Something cold and primal was crawling up his spine, a recognition that bypassed logic and struck directly at his gut. The champagne tasted bitter on his tongue. The limousine's rear door opened with mechanical precision. A woman's leg emerged first, elegant, familiar, wrapped in black silk. Then came the hand, pale and graceful, gripping the door frame with deliberate calm. Vincent's world began to tilt on its axis as Elena stepped into the golden light of his celebration. She looked magnificent. Gone was the tired, defeated woman he divorced 3 years ago. This Elena wore confidence like armor, her dark hair swept into an elegant updo that showcased the graceful line of her neck. The black dress hugged curves he remembered mapping with his fingers during countless nights when love felt eternal. But it wasn't Elena's transformation that stopped Vincent's heart. It wasn't the way she moved with regal composure toward his party, ignoring the stunned silence that rippled through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. It was what came next. For small figures emerged from the limousine behind her, children so young they needed help stepping down onto the driveway. The valets, trained to handle any situation with professional grace, stood frozen as Elena lifted the smallest child, a boy with dark curls and familiar green eyes, into her arms. Vincent's champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering against marble with a sound like breaking promises. The noise seemed to awaken the crowd from their trance, whispers buzzing like angry hornets. Jesus Christ, James Morrison breathed somewhere behind him. Are those? Vincent couldn't answer. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think beyond the mathematical impossibility unfolding before him. 4 children. All appearing to be the same age. All bearing features that made his chest constrict with terrifying recognition. Elena approached the steps with measured grace, her 3 walking children flanking her like a small army. The little girl with his mother's nose. The boy with his stubborn chin. Another girl whose smile was pure Elena but whose eyes, God, whose eyes were exactly like his own. The crowd parted as she ascended the marble steps, guests stumbling over themselves to clear a path. Camera phones appeared, quickly disappearing again as security moved to intercept, but Elena commanded attention that no amount of money could purchase. She stopped 3 feet from Vincent, close enough that he could smell her perfume, the same vanilla and jasmine scent that used to linger on his pillowcases. Close enough to see that her dark eyes held no anger, no vengeance, only a calm certainty that terrified him more than any corporate takeover. "Hello, Vincent," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent crowd. "Happy birthday." The little boy in her arms studied Vincent with solemn curiosity, his small hand fisted in Elena's dress. One of the girls, the one with his green eyes, took a step closer, her head tilted in the universal gesture of childhood wonder. "Mama," the child said, her voice pure and cutting through the tension like sunlight through storm clouds, "is this our daddy?" Vincent's knees nearly buckled. The word daddy hung in the air like an accusation, a revelation, a prayer all at once. Every conversation at the party died. Every pretense crumbled. Every carefully constructed wall he'd built around his new life began to shake. Cassandra's hand fell away from his arm. "Vincent." Her voice climbed an octave. "Vincent, what is this?" But Vincent couldn't look away from Elena's face, from the quiet strength in her expression, from the 4 small miracles standing before him like evidence of everything he'd thrown away. "These are your children," Elena said simply. "Michael, Sophia, Isabella, and David. Your quadruplets. They're 2 years old today." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant crash of Pacific waves and the sound of Vincent's entire world reshaping itself around 4 words. "These are your children." What would you do if your past suddenly appeared at your celebration? Share your thoughts below. Vincent's mind reeled like a computer trying to process too much data at once. 2 years old. The timeline crashed through his consciousness like a wrecking ball. 9 months before that would have been. "That's impossible," he whispered, but even as the words left his lips, he was staring into 4 pairs of eyes that reflected his own features back at him with devastating clarity. Cassandra stepped forward, her perfectly manicured nails digging into Vincent's arm. "This is ridiculous. Vincent, tell them this is ridiculous." Her voice carried the sharp edge of panic beneath its usual honeyed tones. "Security. Where is security?" But Elena remained unmoved, a pillar of calm in the center of the storm she'd created. Little Sophia, the one who'd asked about Daddy, reached up and tugged on her mother's dress. "Mama, why is everyone so quiet?" she asked in that innocent way children have of cutting straight to the heart of adult complications. The crowd pressed closer, phones discreetly recording despite security's efforts. Vincent could see the headlines already. Billionaire's secret children crash birthday bash. His stock price would plummet. The acquisition deals would crumble. Everything he'd built. "Get them out of here," he said, his voice barely recognizable even to himself. "Whatever game this is, Elena, it ends now." Elena's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her dark eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or the ghost of old pain. She shifted little David to her other hip, his small fist still clutched in her dress. "No game, Vincent. Just truth." She reached into her small purse and withdrew a manila envelope. "Birth certificates. DNA tests I had run last month. Medical records from when I was carrying them." Her voice remained steady, professional, like she was presenting a business proposal. "All 4 children. Conceived the night before you served me divorce papers." The envelope hung between them like a weapon neither wanted to touch. Vincent stared at it as if it might explode, destroy everything he'd spent 3 years rebuilding. "You're lying." But his voice cracked on the words. Because he remembered that night, their last night together before everything fell apart. Elena had been trying so hard to save their marriage, to reconnect, to find their way back to each other. And he, God help him, he'd let her try because he'd been too cowardly to tell her about Cassandra. James Morrison appeared at his elbow, his face pale beneath his tan. Vincent, we need to move this inside. Now. Before. Before what? Elena's voice cut through the whispered urgency. Before people see what kind of man abandons his pregnant wife. Before they realize the great Vincent Ashford walked away from 4 babies without ever looking back. I didn't know. The words exploded from Vincent's chest with more force than he'd intended. The crowd flinched back, and little Isabella started to cry at the sudden loud noise. Elena immediately bent down, scooping up the frightened child with her free arm, somehow managing to hold both toddlers with practiced ease. "Shoo, baby girl," she whispered, pressing a kiss to Isabella's forehead. "It's okay. Mama's here." The tenderness in her voice, the natural way she comforted his children, hit Vincent like a physical blow. This was real. These children were real. And Elena had been raising them alone while he'd been playing house with a woman who couldn't even remember to feed his goldfish. Cassandra's voice climbed another octave. "This is insane. Vincent, you would have told me if you had children. You said you never wanted kids. You said." "I said a lot of things." Vincent's words came out flat, defeated. He was staring at Michael, the quiet one who stood closest to Elena's leg, his small hand gripping her dress like an anchor. The boy's face was Vincent's own at that age. He'd seen the photos in his mother's albums. The stubborn set of the jaw, the way his eyebrows drew together when he was thinking hard. Vincent. Elena's voice was softer now, meant just for him despite the audience of hundreds. "I'm not here to destroy your life. I'm here because they deserve to see their father on his birthday. Because they ask about you." "They ask about me?" The question slipped out before he could stop it, vulnerable and raw. Sophia nodded solemnly. "Mama shows us pictures. She says you're very busy, but you love us anyway." The simple statement hit harder than any accusation Elena could have made. She'd been protecting him, even after everything he'd done. Telling their children he loved them when he'd never even known they existed. "This is too much," Cassandra announced, her voice shrill with growing hysteria. "Vincent, choose. Right now. It's me or this chaos. You can't seriously be considering." "Considering what?" Vincent finally looked at her, really looked at her for the first time all evening. The woman he'd thought he loved, whom he'd left his wife for, stood there demanding he choose between her and his own blood. "Considering acknowledging my children? Children you didn't even know existed 5 minutes ago." Cassandra's mask of perfection was cracking, revealing something ugly underneath. "This woman shows up with some kids, and suddenly you're father of the year." Elena's jaw tightened, the first crack in her composed facade. "Some kids." Her voice carried the dangerous quiet of a mother protecting her cubs. "These are your fiancé's children, Ms. Milano. His flesh and blood." The crowd murmured, sensing the shift in power, the way the evening was spiraling beyond anyone's control. Vincent could feel his carefully constructed life unraveling thread by thread, but all he could focus on was the way David was studying him with those impossibly familiar green eyes. How do you handle moments when your whole world shifts in an instant? Tell us in the comments. "I need proof," Vincent said finally, hating himself for the words but unable to stop them. "Real proof. Not just documents that could be forged." Elena's face closed off completely. "Of course," she said, her voice returning to that professional coolness. "Your lawyer can contact mine. We'll arrange DNA testing through the courts if necessary." She turned to leave, gathering her children like a shepherd with her flock, and Vincent felt something crucial slipping away. "Wait," he called out, the word torn from his throat. "Elena, wait." She paused but didn't turn around. "What, Vincent?" But he had no answer. No words for the earthquake splitting his world in half, no explanation for the way his chest felt hollow and full at the same time. So Elena walked away, carrying 2 children while the other 2 flanked her like tiny soldiers, leaving Vincent standing in the wreckage of his perfect party, watching his past and future disappear into the California night. Vincent stood frozen on his marble steps, watching the limousine's taillights disappear into the night. The party continued around him in muted whispers and sideways glances, but the celebration felt like a funeral now, the death of everything he thought he knew about himself. Vincent. Cassandra's voice cut through his paralysis like ice water. "We need to talk. Now." But before he could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent text from James Morrison. "Elena's limo broke down at the bottom of your driveway. Kids are crying. Media vultures circling. Handle this before it becomes a circus." Vincent's heart lurched. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring Cassandra's protests, and jogged down the winding driveway. Sure enough, the black limousine sat motionless beside the estate's iron gates, hazard lights blinking like a distress signal. A small crowd of paparazzi had already gathered outside the gates, cameras flashing through the bars like lightning. Through the limo's rear window, he could see Elena holding a crying child. Isabella, he thought. The other three pressed close to their mother, their earlier bravery replaced by the confusion of tired toddlers far past their bedtime. Vincent approached the driver's window. "What's the problem?" The chauffeur, a weathered man in his 60s, shook his head grimly. "Engine just died, sir. Won't turn over. Gonna need a tow, but with those photographers out there." He gestured toward the gates where more camera flashes were erupting. "Might be a while before anyone can get through." Vincent closed his eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices. He could leave them here, let Elena figure it out herself. It would be easier, cleaner. Or, he tapped on the passenger window. Elena looked up, her composed mask slipping just enough to show exhaustion beneath. She lowered the window halfway. "The car won't start," she said simply, as if this were a minor inconvenience rather than a crisis. But Vincent could see the stress lines around her eyes, the way she held Isabella protectively against her chest. "I can see that." Vincent glanced back toward his house, where party lights still twinkled like false promises. "The press is gathering. You can't stay here." "We'll manage." Elena's chin lifted with that stubborn pride he remembered from their marriage. "I've called another car service. It'll be hours before they can get through that mob." Vincent's voice was rougher than he intended. "Those photographers smell blood. They'll camp out all night if they have to." As if summoned by his words, camera flashes intensified beyond the gates. He could hear shouted questions. "Vincent, are those your children? How long have you known? What does Cassandra think?" Sophia whimpered in the back seat, pressing closer to her mother. "Mama, why are the lights so bright?" Elena's jaw tightened. She was trapped, and they both knew it. Pride warred with maternal instinct across her features, and Vincent found himself holding his breath. "There's a guest house," he said finally. "At the back of the property. Private entrance, no photographers. You could—" He swallowed hard. "You could stay there tonight. Until this dies down." Elena stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for ulterior motives. "That's not necessary. It's practical." Vincent kept his voice neutral, businesslike. "The kids are exhausted. They don't need to be traumatized by a media circus." Michael, the quiet observer, spoke up from his car seat. "Mama, I'm scared of the loud noises." Vincent's chest constricted. His son, was afraid, and it was Vincent's fault. His party, his drama, his choices that had led to 4 innocent children being trapped in a broken-down car while strangers shouted questions they were too young to understand. "Please," he added, the word coming out more vulnerable than he'd intended. "Just for tonight." Elena closed her eyes, her internal struggle playing out across her features. When she opened them again, Vincent saw the woman he'd once loved, practical, protective, willing to swallow her pride for her children's sake. "Just tonight," she agreed. "And we leave first thing in the morning." 20 minutes later, Vincent found himself in the surreal position of carrying sleeping children from a golf cart to the guest house while Elena followed with diaper bags and overnight supplies. The guest cottage, a modest 3-bedroom sanctuary he'd used for visiting business partners, felt oddly intimate with Elena moving through it like she belonged there. "Isabella always needs her bunny to sleep," Elena murmured, tucking the stuffed animal beside the little girl in the master bed she'd share with Sophia. "And David has to have a night light." Vincent watched from the doorway, struck by the choreography of motherhood, the way Elena knew exactly what each child needed, how she moved with practiced efficiency born of countless nights doing this routine alone. "Where do you want me to put Michael?" he asked, feeling helpless and unnecessary. "The couch pulls out," Elena said without looking at him. "He likes to be close to me when we're somewhere new." Somewhere new. Like this wasn't the property where Elena had once planned to raise children of her own, back when she thought their marriage would last forever. As Elena settled the children, Vincent found himself studying their faces in sleep. Michael's mouth fell open slightly, just like Vincent did when he was deeply unconscious. Sophia's hand curled into a fist beside her cheek, a gesture he recognized from old photos of himself as a child. Isabella mumbled something in her sleep, and David shifted closer to his sister with protective instinct. They were his. The DNA tests Elena had mentioned were just formalities. These children carried his features, his expressions, pieces of himself he'd never known existed. "They're beautiful," he said softly when Elena emerged from the bedroom. She paused in the hallway, her hand on the light switch. For a moment, her carefully maintained composure cracked, showing the exhausted single mother beneath. "They're everything," she replied. "My whole world." The simple statement hung between them like an indictment. These children, his children, were her everything, and he'd been nothing to them. A stranger. A story their mother told them at bedtime. "Elena, I don't." She held up a hand, stopping his words before they could form into apologies he didn't know how to make. "It's late. We should all get some rest." She disappeared into the master bedroom, leaving Vincent alone in the living room with the pull-out couch and the weight of everything he'd lost without ever knowing he'd had it. Outside, he could still hear the distant murmur of his birthday party, the celebration of a life that now felt as hollow as an echo. What do you think Vincent is feeling right now? Share your thoughts below. Vincent couldn't sleep. He lay on the pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling while his mind replayed every moment from the past 3 hours. The soft sounds of his children breathing in the next room felt like a symphony he'd never learned to hear. At 2 a.m., he gave up on rest and padded quietly to the kitchenette. The guest house had been stocked with coffee and basic supplies, a habit left over from when Elena used to manage his household details with meticulous care. She'd always thought of everything. As he waited for the coffee to brew, Vincent noticed Elena's purse on the counter, the same small black clutch she'd carried when she dropped her bombshell. It sat open, and he could see the corner of the manila envelope peeking out, along with something that made his breath catch. A small, worn photo album. Vincent's hands trembled as he pulled it free. The cover was simple brown leather, the kind Elena used to buy from that little shop in Center City, Philadelphia, back when they were young and broke and deliriously happy. Before the money. Before success poisoned everything they'd built together. He opened it carefully, as if it might crumble in his hands. The first page showed Elena in a hospital bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a single tiny baby. The timestamp read, March 15, 2023. Vincent's chest constricted as he realized this was the day his children were born while he was probably in some boardroom, making deals that now seemed meaningless. Elena looked so young in the photo, so scared. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. But she was smiling at the camera, or rather, at whoever was taking the picture. A nurse, maybe. Because Vincent hadn't been there. He turned the page. 4 crisp hospital bracelets were carefully preserved behind plastic. Baby Ashford A, Baby Ashford B, Baby Ashford C, Baby Ashford D. Below them, a note in Elena's careful handwriting. Michael 4 pounds 2 ounces. Sophia, 3 pounds 14 ounces. Isabella, 4 pounds 1 ounce. David, 3 pounds 11 ounces. All healthy. All perfect. All daddy's children. Vincent's coffee mug slipped from his fingers, shattering on the tile floor. The crash echoed through the quiet cottage, and he heard movement from the bedroom. "Vincent." Elena's voice was soft, concerned. "Are you okay?" He couldn't answer. Couldn't explain that he was falling apart looking at evidence of a life he should have lived, children he should have held, moments he'd missed while chasing shadows. Elena appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a hotel robe she'd apparently packed. Her eyes went immediately to the album in his hands, then to the broken mug on the floor. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I shouldn't have." "It's okay." Elena moved past him to get the broom from a small closet, her movements efficient and practiced. "I brought it for you to see anyway." Vincent stared at her. "You did." Elena began sweeping up the ceramic shards, not meeting his eyes. "They ask about you, Vincent. All the time. I thought maybe if you saw." She trailed off, focusing on the mundane task of cleaning up his mess. Vincent turned another page in the album. A photo of Elena in a rocking chair, holding two babies while the other two lay in bassinets nearby. She looked impossibly thin, overwhelmed, but there was fierce love in her expression as she gazed at her children. Their children. Elena. His voice came out as barely a whisper. "Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant?" She paused in her sweeping, her knuckles white on the broom handle. When you were serving me divorce papers. When you were moving your girlfriend into our house 3 days later. When you changed your phone number so I couldn't reach you." Each word hit like a physical blow. Vincent remembered those days, the ruthless efficiency with which he'd severed all ties to his old life, convinced he was cutting away dead weight. He'd blocked Elena's number, changed his contact information, instructed his lawyers to handle everything. He'd wanted a clean break. God help him, he'd gotten one. "I tried," Elena continued, her voice steady but her hands shaking slightly. "I called your office. Your secretary said you'd left instructions not to put through any calls from me. I sent letters to your lawyer. They were returned unopened." Vincent turned another page. Photos of the children's first Christmas. Elena had somehow managed to create magic in what looked like a tiny apartment, a small tree, wrapped presents, for babies in matching red outfits. She was in the photo too, smiling for the camera, but Vincent could see the exhaustion, the loneliness, the weight of doing it all alone. "How?" The question came out strangled. "How did you manage 4 babies by yourself?" Elena set the broom aside and sat across from him at the small table. In the soft light of the kitchenette, she looked fragile and strong all at once. "Your sister helped for the first few months," she said quietly. "Before you cut her off too for staying in touch with me." Vincent winced. He'd forgotten about that, the ultimatum he'd given Rebecca. Choose sides. Him or Elena. He'd been so convinced he was right, so certain that anyone who couldn't support his new life wasn't worth keeping. "She wanted to tell you," Elena continued. "About the pregnancy, about the babies. I made her promise not to. I was so angry, Vincent. And hurt. And terrified." Her voice grew smaller. "I thought if you knew, you might try to take them from me. You had all the money, all the power. I had nothing except them." Vincent stared at a photo of the children taking their first steps, all 4 of them lined up along a couch, chubby hands gripping the cushions as they prepared to launch themselves toward their mother's waiting arms. "I would never have taken them from you," he said. Elena's laugh was bitter. "You took everything else. Our house, our friends, our life together. You made it clear that anything connected to me was disposable." She reached across the table and turned to a page near the back of the album. "This is what you missed." The photo showed 4 toddlers around a small birthday cake, their faces covered in frosting, Elena laughing in the background. The timestamp read, March 15, 2024. Their first birthday. His children's first birthday, and he'd been, where? Vincent couldn't even remember. Some business dinner, probably. Some meaningless networking event while his children were celebrating their first year of life without their father. "Elena, he started, but she stood abruptly. "I should check on them," she said. "Isabella sometimes has bad dreams in new places." She disappeared into the bedroom, leaving Vincent alone with the album and the crushing weight of everything he destroyed. Page after page of milestones he'd missed, moments he could never reclaim, evidence of a love so pure it made his throat close with unshed tears. What do you do when you realize you've made the biggest mistake of your life? Let us know your thoughts. In the distance, he could hear Elena humming softly, the same lullaby she used to hum when they were married and she dreamed of the children they'd have someday. Children who existed now, sleeping peacefully in the next room, strangers to the father who should have been their whole world. Vincent closed the album carefully, his hands shaking with the magnitude of his failures. Outside, dawn was beginning to touch the California sky, painting everything in shades of regret and possibility. Vincent woke to the sound of giggling. For a moment, he was disoriented. This wasn't his master suite, wasn't his California king bed with Egyptian cotton sheets. Then memory crashed back, the party, the revelation, for children who carried his DNA and called someone else daddy in their bedtime prayers. Sunlight streamed through the guest house windows, and the giggling grew louder. Vincent sat up on the pull-out couch, his expensive suit wrinkled beyond salvation, and peered toward the kitchenette. Elena stood at the small stove, her hair in a messy bun, wearing jeans and a simple sweater that somehow made her more beautiful than any designer gown. She was making pancakes while 4 small bodies crowded around her legs like devoted disciples. "Mama, can I flip one?" Sophia asked, bouncing on her toes. "Me too. Me too." Isabella chimed in, not wanting to be left out. "One at a time, babies," Elena laughed, the sound lighter than Vincent had heard in years. "Michael, you're first since you asked so nicely." Vincent watched, transfixed, as Elena lifted Michael onto a step stool and guided his small hands around the spatula. The little boy's face scrunched in concentration, an expression Vincent recognized from his own childhood photos. "Like this, Mama?" "Perfect, sweetheart. You're such a good helper." David, the quiet observer, noticed Vincent first. He toddled over to the couch, studying his father with those impossibly familiar green eyes. Vincent held perfectly still, afraid to spook this tiny creature who carried half his genetic code. "You sleep funny," David announced matter-of-factly. Vincent couldn't help but smile. "I do. Aha. Your hair goes like this." David mimed hair sticking up at odd angles, making Vincent laugh despite everything. The sound drew Elena's attention. She turned, spatula in hand, and Vincent saw something soften in her expression. "You're awake. I hope we didn't." "It's fine," Vincent said quickly. "More than fine. I haven't heard laughter like that in." He trailed off, realizing the truth. He hadn't heard genuine joy in his house in years. Cassandra's laughter was performative, calculated. This was pure happiness, the kind that came from being exactly where you belonged. Sophia abandoned her pancake duties and skipped over to the couch. "Are you our daddy for real?" she asked with the devastating directness of a 2-year-old. Vincent's throat closed. He looked helplessly at Elena, who had gone very still at the stove. Vincent swallowed hard. "I think so, sweetheart. What do you think?" Sophia studied his face with scientific intensity. Then she reached up and touched his cheek with one small sticky finger. "You have my eyes," she announced. "Mama says I got my eyes from my daddy." "You did," Vincent whispered. "You definitely did." Elena appeared with a plate of pancakes cut into small, manageable pieces. "Kids, let's eat at the table." "Daddy," she caught herself, her cheeks flushing pink. "Vincent can join us if he wants." But Vincent had heard it. "Daddy." The word hung in the air between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. "I'd like that," he said softly. Breakfast was chaos in the most beautiful way possible. Michael insisted on syrup patterns, creating sticky abstract art on his pancakes. Isabella sang a song about pancakes being fluffy clouds. Sophia peppered Vincent with questions about everything from his favorite color to whether he'd ever seen a real elephant. David, true to his quiet nature, simply observed while methodically eating every bite on his plate. "So you live in that big house?" Sophia asked, pointing vaguely in the direction of the main estate. "I do," Vincent said, cutting up pancakes for Isabella when she struggled with her fork. "Is it bigger than our apartment?" Elena shot him a warning look, but Vincent answered honestly. "Much bigger." "Do you have toys?" Vincent paused, syrup-covered fork halfway to his mouth. "No, I don't have toys." "That's sad," Michael observed. "How do you have fun without toys?" Good question, Vincent thought. How had he been having fun? Board meetings? Charity galas where he wrote checks to feel important? Dinners with people who only wanted his money? "I think," Vincent said carefully, "I forgot how to have fun." David, who'd been quietly studying Vincent throughout the meal, suddenly stood on his chair and reached across the table. Before Vincent could react, the little boy had placed both sticky hands on Vincent's cheeks. "Don't be sad, Daddy," David said with the profound wisdom that sometimes emerges from the mouths of babes. "We can teach you how to play." Vincent's eyes filled with tears he couldn't stop. No one had called him Daddy before. No one had ever offered to teach him anything simply because they loved him. These children, his children, were offering him grace he didn't deserve, love he'd never earned. "I'd like that very much," he managed. Elena was watching from across the table, her own eyes suspiciously bright. When their gazes met, Vincent saw something he'd thought was lost forever, tenderness. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the ghost of what they'd once meant to each other. "Mama, can Daddy come to the park with us?" Isabella asked, unknowingly shattering the fragile moment. Elena's smile faltered. "Sweetie, Daddy's very busy." "Actually," Vincent interrupted, surprising himself, "I don't have any meetings today." It was a lie. His calendar was packed with conference calls, contract reviews, strategy sessions. But looking at 4 hopeful faces, Vincent realized he didn't care. "I'd love to go to the park." Sophia clapped her hands. "Can we show him the swings? And the big slide?" Michael added, "The duck pond." Isabella practically shouted. Vincent looked at Elena, waiting for her permission, her approval, her guidance. She studied his face for a long moment, searching for something, sincerity maybe, or the man she'd once loved enough to marry. "Okay," she said finally. "We can go to the park." An hour later, Vincent found himself pushing 4 small children on swings, their delighted shrieks of "Higher, Daddy, higher!" filling the California morning air. Elena sat on a nearby bench, watching with an expression Vincent couldn't quite read. He'd never known such simple joy existed. The way Sophia's face lit up when he caught her at the bottom of the slide. How Michael's quiet personality bloomed when Vincent listened, really listened, to his observations about the ducks in the pond. Isabella's infectious laughter as she tried to teach Vincent her made-up song about butterflies. David's small hand slipping trustingly into his as they walked the park paths. This was what he'd thrown away. This was what he deemed not exciting enough for his grand life. For the first time in 3 years, Vincent Ashford felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Have you ever discovered something beautiful you didn't know you were missing? Tell us about it in the comments. The perfect morning shattered like glass against concrete when Vincent's phone rang. He'd been kneeling in the sandbox, helping David build what the little boy called the biggest castle in the whole world, when the familiar ringtone cut through the peaceful park atmosphere. Vincent glanced at the screen and felt his stomach drop. "Cassandra. Daddy, don't stop." David protested, tugging on Vincent's sleeve. "The castle needs more towers." Vincent looked at his son, with his dirt-covered hands and gap-toothed smile, then at the phone that wouldn't stop ringing. Elena watched from the bench where she sat with Isabella on her lap, her expression carefully neutral but her body language tense. "I have to take this," Vincent said apologetically. "I'll be right back, buddy." He walked a few steps away, but Elena's sharp hearing caught every word. "Where the hell are you?" Cassandra's voice was shrill enough to carry across the playground. "The party was a disaster. There are photographers camping outside our house. Your stock dropped 12 points in pre-market trading, and you're nowhere to be found." Vincent closed his eyes. "Cassandra, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been playing house with your ex-wife and some kids that may or may not be yours." Her voice climbed another octave. "Do you have any idea what this looks like? What people are saying? They are mine." The words came out stronger than Vincent had intended. "The children. They're mine." Silence on the other end, then a laugh that could freeze hell. "Oh, Vincent. You really think some desperate woman shows up with convenient babies and suddenly you're father of the year? She's playing you. This is about money. It's always about money." Vincent glanced back at Elena, who was now helping Michael navigate the monkey bars, her face a study in focused calm. But he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw was set. She was listening to every word. "It's not about money," Vincent said. "Everything is about money, darling. Especially with women like her." Cassandra's voice turned syrupy, manipulative. "Think about it rationally. She could have told you about these alleged children at any time in the past 3 years. Why now? Why show up at your birthday party with maximum drama and media attention? It's a shakedown, pure and simple." Vincent felt something cold creeping up his spine. Not because he believed Cassandra, but because he could see Elena's posture growing more rigid with each passing second. She was hearing this conversation, hearing herself being called a gold digger, a liar, a manipulator. "You need to come home," Cassandra continued. "Now. We have damage control to do. My publicist is already working on a statement." "Your publicist?" Vincent's voice sharpened. "Since when do you have a publicist?" A pause. Then, more carefully, since I realized this scandal could hurt both our careers. Vincent, I'm trying to protect us. Our future together. Don't let some fantasy about children you've never met destroy what we've built." Vincent looked at David, who was waving proudly from his sandcastle, and felt something crack inside his chest. They're not a fantasy. They're real children with real needs who have been living without their father for 2 years. Because you didn't know they existed. Cassandra's mask was slipping now, revealing the calculating woman beneath. And honestly, maybe that was for the best. You've never wanted children, Vincent. You said they would complicate your life, tie you down, make you ordinary. Have you forgotten who you are? The words hit like a slap, mainly because they were true. Vincent had said those things, believed them with religious fervor. Children were anchors, he declared to anyone who would listen. They made men soft, distracted, less than their full potential. Looking at his 4 children playing in the sunshine, Vincent realized he'd never been more wrong about anything in his life. "I have to go," he said. "Vincent, don't you dare hang up on me. If you walk away from this phone call, if you choose them over me." Vincent ended the call. But the damage was done. Elena was standing now, gathering the children with the efficient movements of someone preparing for battle or flight. Her face had gone completely blank, that professional mask she'd worn last night sliding back into place. "Kids, it's time to go," she announced in a voice that brooked no argument. "But Mama," Sophia protested, "Daddy was going to help us feed the ducks." "Daddy has important business to attend to," Elena said, not looking at Vincent. "Just like always." The words were a knife between his ribs. Vincent approached her, desperate to explain, to fix whatever had just broken. "Elena, that's not. It's fine." She was already wiping dirt off Isabella's hands, her movements sharp and efficient. "This was always temporary. We should have known better than to pretend otherwise." "Pretend?" Vincent caught her arm gently. "Elena, stop. Look at me." She did, and what he saw in her dark eyes made his chest constrict. Pain. Deep, familiar pain that he'd put there before and was apparently destined to put there again. "Your girlfriend is right," Elena said quietly, her voice steady despite the devastation Vincent could see lurking beneath the surface. "This was about money. Not mine, theirs." She gestured toward the children. "I thought maybe, seeing them, you might want to be part of their lives. Help support them. Be a father." "I do want that." "No, you don't." Elena's voice was flat, final. "You want the idea of it. You want to feel good about yourself, play daddy for a few hours when it's convenient. But the moment real life calls, the moment your other life demands your attention, this becomes a problem to be managed." Michael had wandered over, sensing the adult tension with the intuition children possess. He slipped his small hand into Vincent's, looking up with confused eyes. "Are you coming home with us, Daddy?" The innocent question hung in the air like an accusation. Vincent looked at Elena, at his 4 children, at the life he could have if he was brave enough to reach for it. But his phone was buzzing again. Messages from his board of directors. Emergency meeting requests. Stock alerts. The machinery of his empire demanding attention. Elena saw him glance at the phone, and something died in her expression. "Say goodbye to the children," she said softly. "It's time to go home." When faced with choosing between an old life and a new possibility, what would you do? Share your thoughts below. Vincent opened his mouth to protest, to fight, to choose them. But his phone buzzed again, and Elena was already walking away, gathering their children like a shepherd protecting her flock from wolves. And Vincent, God help him, let them go. Vincent stood alone in the empty park, his phone buzzing incessantly in his hand while the echo of children's laughter faded into memory. The sand castle David had been so proud of was already starting to crumble in the California breeze, and Vincent stared at it like it held the answers to questions he was only beginning to understand. His Bentley sat in the parking lot, gleaming black perfection that could take him back to his other life. The board meetings, the damage control, the woman who saw his children as a public relations nightmare. All he had to do was drive away. Instead, Vincent sank onto the bench where Elena had been sitting, buried his face in his hands, and tried to remember who he used to be. Before the money. Before the empire. Before he'd convinced himself that love was a weakness and family was a chain around ambitious ankles. He'd been 25 when he'd met Elena, a struggling entrepreneur with more dreams than capital. She'd been working as a waitress in a small cafe near his first office, saving every tip to put herself through night school. Vincent had been immediately captivated by her fierce intelligence, her dry humor, the way she challenged his half-formed business theories over coffee that tasted like motor oil. "You're going to be somebody important," she told him on their third date, her eyes shining with belief he hadn't felt for himself yet. "But don't let being important make you forget to be good." When had he stopped being good? Vincent's phone rang again. This time it was James Morrison. "Thank God," James's voice was tight with panic. "Vincent, where are you? The board is having emergency calls. 3 major investors are pulling out. The media is having a field day with this secret children thing, and Cassandra is giving interviews to anyone with a microphone." Interviews. Vincent's blood chilled. What kind of interviews? "Damage control," she says. "Painting you as the victim of a calculated extortion attempt. She's calling your ex-wife an opportunist who timed this revelation for maximum financial gain." James paused. "Vincent, is any of this true? Because if it is, we need to get ahead of it legally." Vincent closed his eyes, seeing Elena's face when she'd heard Cassandra's accusations. The way her shoulders had squared, the professional mask sliding back into place to hide her pain. "It's not true," he said quietly. "What?" "None of it. Elena didn't want money. She never even asked for money." Vincent's voice grew stronger. "She wanted their children to know their father. That's all." Silence on the other end. "Then, their children? Vincent, you're talking like they're mine?" "They are mine, James. For beautiful kids who call me daddy and think I hung the moon, and I just walked away from them because my stock price dropped 12 points. Another pause. When James spoke again, his voice was careful, the tone reserved for talking someone off a ledge. "Vincent, you're clearly emotional right now. Why don't you come back? We'll have a drink, talk this through rationally." "Rationally?" Vincent laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You know what's rational, James? Choosing love over money. Choosing family over stock prices. Choosing to be the man my children can be proud of instead of the man who abandoned them twice." "Vincent, you're not thinking clearly." Vincent ended the call and turned off his phone. For the first time in years, Vincent Ashford sat in complete silence, no buzzing devices or urgent demands on his attention. Just him, the afternoon sun, and the terrible clarity of understanding exactly what he'd lost. The guest house was empty when Vincent returned, but Elena's rental car was still in the driveway. Vincent found them in the main house's kitchen, where Elena was filling sippy cups with juice while the children sat at his massive granite island, their small legs swinging from bar stools that dwarfed them. Cassandra stood near the wine refrigerator, perfectly made up despite the early hour, her arms crossed as she watched Elena with undisguised hostility. "Well, well," Cassandra said as Vincent entered. "Look who decided to come back to reality." Elena didn't look up from her task. "We were just getting drinks before we left," she said quietly. "The car service will be here in 20 minutes. Vincent's heart hammered against his ribs. 20 minutes. That's how long he had to figure out how to keep his family from disappearing forever. "You don't have to leave," he said. Cassandra's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. "Oh, they absolutely do. This little performance has gone on long enough." "Performance?" Elena's voice was dangerously quiet. She set down the juice box and turned to face Cassandra fully. "Is that what you think my children are? A performance?" "I think," Cassandra said with the confidence of someone who'd never had to fight for anything real, "you're a desperate woman who saw an opportunity and took it." Vincent was getting engaged. "You needed money. The timing is hardly coincidental." Vincent watched his children's faces as they absorbed the adult tension, saw confusion replace joy, saw the way David's small hand reached protectively toward his mother. These babies were learning that their father's world was cruel, that their existence was seen as shameful, that they were unwanted complications in lives that mattered more than theirs. "Stop." Vincent's voice cut through the toxic atmosphere like a blade. "Cassandra, that's enough." "Vincent, don't be naive." "I said stop." He looked at her, really looked at her, and wondered how he'd ever thought this cold, calculating woman was worth destroying his marriage for. "You need to leave." Cassandra blinked, clearly not expecting this response. "Excuse me." "You heard me. Leave. Now." "Vincent, you can't be serious. These people are trying to ruin us." "These people," Vincent said, his voice growing stronger with each word, "are my family. My children. And if you can't respect that, then you don't belong here." Cassandra's face cycled through disbelief, rage, and finally, cold calculation. "Fine," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "But don't come crawling back when this little fantasy implodes. Don't call me when you realize that playing house doesn't pay the bills or maintain your lifestyle." She grabbed her purse from the counter, her heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor. At the doorway, she paused. "You know what the difference is between her and me, Vincent? I would never trap you with children you never wanted." The door slammed behind her, leaving a silence so complete that Vincent could hear his own heartbeat. Elena was staring at him, her expression unreadable. The children had gone very quiet, sensing the gravity of what had just happened. "Vincent," Elena said carefully, "what did you just do?" Vincent looked at his 4 children, at the woman who'd loved him when he was nobody and had somehow found the strength to love their children even when he wasn't there. "I chose," he said simply. "I finally chose." What choice would you make when everything you thought you wanted conflicts with everything you truly need? Tell us in the comments. 6 months later, Vincent Ashford stood in a place he'd never imagined himself, the playground of a modest Philadelphia elementary school, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of his usual $1,000 suits, pushing Sophia on a swing while her siblings played nearby. "Higher, Daddy!" Sophia shrieked with delight, her dark hair streaming behind her like a banner of pure joy. "Any higher and you'll fly to the moon," Vincent laughed, catching her on the backswing. "I want to go to the moon," she declared with the fearless confidence of a 2.5-year-old who believed her father could make anything possible. "Maybe we'll work up to that," Vincent said, slowing her swing as Michael approached, tugging on his father's sleeve. "Daddy," Isabella fell down. "She's crying." Vincent immediately jogged to where Isabella sat on the ground near the monkey bars, tears streaming down her chubby cheeks. Elena was already there, examining a scraped knee with the practiced efficiency of an experienced mother. "It's just a little scrape, baby girl," Elena soothed, pulling a bandage from her ever-present mom bag. "But it still hurts, doesn't it?" Isabella nodded dramatically, her lower lip trembling. Vincent knelt beside them, and Isabella immediately reached for him with both arms. "Daddy, kiss it better?" Vincent's chest constricted with the same overwhelming love that had been ambushing him daily since he'd made the choice to stay. He pressed a gentle kiss to the colorful bandage Elena had applied. "There," he said solemnly. "All better." Isabella's tears stopped like magic. "It doesn't hurt anymore," she announced, scrambling back toward the playground equipment. Vincent and Elena watched her go, sharing one of those parental moments that had become the foundation of their slowly rebuilding relationship. "She just wanted your attention," Elena said quietly. "The scrape wasn't that bad." "I'm learning," Vincent replied, and he was. Learning that children needed presence more than presents, attention more than achievements. Learning that love was measured in bedtime stories and scraped knee kisses, not in trust funds and business empires. David appeared at Vincent's elbow, as quiet and observant as always. "Daddy, when are we going home?" Home. The word still made Vincent's heart skip. Home was no longer the Malibu mansion with its marble floors and infinity pools. Home was Elena's modest 3-bedroom house in a middle-class Philadelphia neighborhood, where Vincent had moved after selling the California estate and stepping back from day-to-day operations of his companies. The business world had been shocked, the media had had a field day, and his net worth had taken a significant hit. Vincent had never been happier. "Soon, buddy," Vincent said, ruffling David's dark curls. "Just a few more minutes." As David wandered back to the sandbox, Elena turned to Vincent. "You know you don't have to prove anything, right? Being here for every playground visit, every scraped knee, you're allowed to have your own life too." Vincent studied her face, looking for hidden meaning. They'd been navigating this delicate dance for months, 2 people learning to co-parent while figuring out what they meant to each other now. Elena was cautious, protective of her heart after everything they'd been through. Vincent was patient, understanding that trust had to be earned back in daily increments of reliability and care. "This is my life," he said simply. "They're my life. Your." He paused, searching for the right words. "You're all my life, Elena. If you'll have me." Elena's breath caught. They'd been carefully avoiding this conversation, focusing on the children, on building routines and stability. But Vincent's words hung in the afternoon air like a bridge waiting to be crossed. "Vincent," she said softly, "we can't just go back to how things were. Too much has happened. We're different people now." "I know," Vincent said, stepping closer. "I don't want to go back. I want to go forward. With you. With them. As a family." Elena's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for months. "I'm scared," she whispered. "What if you wake up one day and realize this isn't enough? What if you miss your old life? What if?" Vincent silenced her with a gentle kiss, their first kiss in over 3 years. When they broke apart, Elena was crying, but she was also smiling. "I wake up every morning and watch you make pancakes for our children," Vincent said, his forehead resting against hers. "I help with bath time and bedtime stories and midnight fevers. I live in a house where the floors are covered with toys and the refrigerator is decorated with crayon masterpieces. And Elena." He cupped her face in his hands. "I have never, not once, missed that empty mansion or those meaningless board meetings or any of it." "Daddy. Mama." Sophia's voice interrupted the moment. "Look. We built you a castle." Vincent and Elena turned to see all 4 children standing proudly beside an elaborate sand construction in the playground sandbox. It was lopsided and already crumbling, but their faces shone with pride. "It's for you and Mama," Michael explained seriously. "So you can live there together." "With us," Isabella added, as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. "Forever and ever," David concluded in his quiet, matter-of-fact way. Vincent felt Elena's hand slip into his, her fingers intertwining with his as naturally as breathing. He looked at this woman who'd carried his children in secret, raised them alone, protected them with fierce love, and somehow found the grace to let him back into their lives. "So," he said, squeezing her hand gently, "what do you say? Want to live in a sand castle with me?" Elena laughed, the sound richer and more beautiful than any music Vincent had ever heard. "I thought you'd never ask." As the sun set over the Philadelphia skyline, painting the world in shades of gold and possibility, Vincent Ashford gathered his family close. 4 small bodies pressed against him, their mother's hand warm in his, and he finally understood what true wealth really meant. It wasn't measured in stock prices or mansion square footage or magazine covers. It was measured in sticky kisses and bedtime prayers, in scraped knees and sandbox castles, in the simple profound joy of being exactly where you belonged. "I love you," he whispered to Elena, the words carrying 3 years of regret and infinite years of promise. "I love you too," she whispered back. "We all do." And in that moment, surrounded by the chaos and beauty of the life he'd almost thrown away, Vincent Ashford knew he was finally truly home. Thanks for watching all the way through. If you liked this one, we've got plenty more stories you'll love. Just click the image on your screen to watch the next video.